change this name. Okay. Name. हमको तेरा अब कोई मिलेगा फॉर्म पीच के ही ऑन है ठीक है और एक कौन सा था I have already joined.
This recording will not be shared publicly. If at all it will be shared, your faces will be covered. Okay, so we won't share this recording. It's only for the record purpose. Okay. Enjoy.
Thank you. Sounds good.
Hi. My name is Tara, and before we start the class, can everyone introduce and say your name, how old you are, and something that you like to do?
You can start this if you want.
I want to think something I need to do.
Nirvika, do you want to start? I can't hear you. It says that you're unmuted, but I can't hear.
No.
Hi, my name is Nirvika. I am 8 years old and I like to do gymnastics.
Hi. Smarna, do you want to go?
My name is Smarna and I'm 7 years old and I like to play the keyboard.
Vasishta.
My name is Vasista and I'm 7 years old and I like to play the keyboard.
Ria, do you want to go?
My name is Ria. I'm 9 years old and I like to draw.
Soville.
My name is Saville. I'm 9 years old and I like to play basketball.
So now we can start. My name is Tara and I'm 14 years old. And something that I like to do is I like to draw. I like to play sports. And yeah, those are the main things. Also, I like to dance. In the next 6 classes, we're going to learn the basics of chess. And if you have there's a website called chesskid.com. If you have a ChessKid account, then it would be good for the class. And if you don't, then by next week you could create it. It would be helpful. So before we learn how the pieces move, we're going to learn how to say a square. In chess, if you want to say a square, you have to look for 2 things. The first thing is called a file. And a file are the letters at the bottom. It says the letters are A through H. So these are called the files. And the files are the ones that go up and down. So how you would say this is A file, B file, C file, D file, and then it goes all the way to the H file. So that's the first thing that you have to figure out. And the next thing is, can you see the board clearly? Or, okay. Can you see it clearly? Okay. I think instead of the board, we'll do it online so you can see it better. Then you can see the letters and the numbers better. What I was just saying is, in chess, when you want to say a square, first you have to look at files and then you look at the rank. So at the bottom of the chessboard, there's letters that start from A and go through H. So the files are the ones that go up and down. So this is the A file, the B file, C file, D file, E file, F file, G file, and H file. How you know which file it is by looking at the bottom of the chessboard, because it says it tiny, but you can see that there's the letters that tell you what file it is. So files are the letters and they go up and down. What I'll do is I'll do my mouse like this, and then you have to say what file it's on. So you can all unmute and then say which file is this on.
A.
A.
D.
E.
Yeah.
F.
H. B. C.
So I think you all got it. The files are the letters and they go up and down. So that's the first thing you have to know. And the second thing is, on the right side of the chessboard, the numbers that are going from bottom to top, these are called the ranks. And the ranks are the numbers and they go side to side. So the first file, second file, third file, fourth, actually these are called ranks. So files are the ones that go up and down, and these are the letters. And ranks are the numbers, and they go side to side. So first rank, second rank, third rank, fourth rank, fifth rank, sixth rank, seventh rank, and eighth rank. So now we'll do the same thing. I'll do my mouse and then you can say what rank it's on.
6.
4.
5.
5. 8. 1.
1.
3.
3.
5.
Yeah, So the files are the letters and they go up and down. And ranks are the numbers and they go side to side. So those are the two things that you have to know. Now that you know the files and the ranks, how you can say a square is first you look at what file it's on. What file is this piece on?
E.
4. E. E.
Files are the letters, so the E file. And what rank is it on?
4.
4.
So this would be E4. Now we can put somewhere else. What file is it on?
G.
G.
And what rank is it on?
5.
So when you're going to say a square in chess, first you look, what file is it on? What letter is it on? This one is on the G file, and it's on the 5th rank. So we would say this piece is on G5. We say the letter first, the letter is G, and then we say the number. So the pawn is on G5. What file is the pawn on?
B. B.
B.
And what rank?
5.
5.
So what square is the pawn on?
B5.
5.
And this time, what square is the pawn on? Remember to say
D4.
letter and then the number.
D4.
What square is it now?
H3.
A3.
B6.
A3.
3.
A3.
What is a file?
A file is the letters that go up and down.
And what is a rank?
The numbers that go side to side.
That go horizontally.
So files are the letters and they go up and down, and ranks are the numbers and they go side to side. So does everyone have a Chess Kit account?
Yeah.
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 And if you have one, I'll send you the link in the chat. You can click on the link, and then what you can do is you press on start, and then it will tell you G4. So you have to bring your mouse to the G file, and then you bring it up to the 4th rank. So that's what you do. It says the coordinate here. So this is H6. So you go to the H file and you put your mouse on the 6th link and then you click on it. If you have Chess Kit, you can try that.
Yeah. Start again. Start again.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Like when I go into Chess Kid, it like says log in. It says log in.
Do you have a username?
Can I ask my mom?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got all right now.
I'm done.
Then you can try it a few more times and see if you can get a better score.
I got a better score. 17.
I got all 3 out of 3.
That's good. And if you have any problems, you can let me know. If you don't know how to create an account, then I could help you.
I'm done.
So now we can review about how to say a square, and then we can learn about how to move the pieces. What are the files? And what does a file mean?
A file are the letters and they go up and down.
What are the ranks?
The ranks are the numbers and they go side to side.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll circle the mouse and then you have to say what square is it.
E5. E4. E3.
B6.
Yeah.
A2.
2.
H1.
2.
G8.
G8.
E7.
7.
D6.
William.
C3.
G2. A8.
A8.
Does anyone have any questions about how to say square?
No.
And if you don't want to say it loud and you have a question, you could type in the chat. So now that you know how to say a square, we can learn how the chess pieces move. So the first piece that we'll do is called the pawn. And the pawn looks like this. It has a circle, and if you compare a pawn to the other pieces, pawn is smaller than all of the pieces. So that's how you could remember it. It has a circle and it's smaller than all of the other pieces. So I can clear all the pieces and then we can learn about the pawn. A pawn, I said that it has a circle and it's smaller than all of the other pieces. And how a pawn moves is a pawn moves forward and it can go one step. So the piece that I just moved, this is, the color is white. So this is a white pawn. And for the black pieces, this is a black pawn. So in chess, there's two sides. One side is the white side. They move the white pieces. And the other side is the black side, and they move the black pieces. So a pawn moves forward and it goes one step at a time. And the other team can also do the same. But there's a few special rules about a pawn. One special rule is that a pawn, if it's on the starting square, so the starting square for the white pawns are on the second rank. So ranks are side to side, and this one would be the second rank. The black pawns start on the 7th rank. So when a pawn is on the 2nd rank or the 7th rank, that's called the starting square. And the starting square means that the pawn, it hasn't made its first move. So the pawn on f3, is this pawn on the 2nd rank?
No.
It's not, because what rank is the pawn on?
3.
So if a pawn is not on the 2nd rank or the 7th rank, and if it's on the 3rd rank, it's not able to move 2 squares. And that's the same thing for black. If the black pawn is not on the 7th rank, it's not able to go 2 squares. So if a pawn wants to go 2 squares, it has to be on the 2nd rank or on the 7th rank. So the white pawn on e2, when I click on it, it doesn't just give me the option to go 1 square, but you can also see that it's also showing the square e4. It's showing 2 steps ahead. So if a pawn is on the starting square, it can move 2 steps. But if a pawn is not on the starting square, like the pawn on f3, it's only allowed to go 1 step. And another thing about a pawn on the starting rank is a pawn, it has the option to go 2 squares, but you don't have to. You can choose if you want to go 1, or because it's on the starting square, you can choose to go 2. So you don't have to go 2, you can choose. And this only happens if the pawn is on the starting square. So can the black pawn on e7 go 2 steps?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can the white pawn on c2 go 2 steps?
Yeah.
Yes.
But can the black pawn on d6 go 2 steps?
No.
Why can't they go 2 steps?
Because it's not on the
Needs
starting.
to be on the starting square.
So you have to pay close attention and see if it's on the 2nd rank or the 7th rank. The pawn is not on the 7th rank, so they can't go 2 steps. And the next thing about the pawn is how a pawn captures. A pawn, it moves forward 1 step, but if it's on the starting square, it can go 2. And how a pawn captures is it doesn't go forward 1 step, it captures things diagonal. So it moves forward, but it captures pieces 1 square diagonal. You have to be very careful that the pawn is 1 square diagonal and not 2. Because, for example, if the pawn is on c6, these pawns are diagonal, but can the white pawn capture?
No.
No.
So if a pawn wants to capture, it goes 1 step diagonal. And capturing means you take the piece off the board. It means you win the piece. So how you do that is you land on the other side. You land on the enemy piece, and then the black pawn will disappear from the board. So when you capture, you land into the other piece, and the enemy piece will disappear from the board. Can white capture the pawn on f5?
Yes. Yeah.
Can they capture the pawn on g6?
No.
No.
Why not?
Because it's two. It's two. It's two.
Yeah. So it captures diagonal, but a pawn is not allowed to capture forward. So the pawn on e4, it's not allowed to capture the one on e5 because it's not diagonal. The pawn has to be diagonal and then you can capture it. But if the pawn is forward, that means that the white pawn on e4, this pawn is blocked, which means it's not allowed to move because pawns, they don't capture forward, they capture diagonal. So the white pawn will be blocked by the black pawn. So when pawns are blocked, it means that there's an enemy pawn that's in front of it, and the enemy pawn is stopping the piece from moving. The black pawn is stopping the white pawn from moving. Why can't the pawn on d4, why can't the pawn move?
Because it's forward.
And this is called the pawn is being blocked. Or you could say blockaded. Why can't the pawn on a4 move?
Because it's not diagonal. It's
But, yeah. But if there's a pawn diagonal, this pawn on h4 is free and it's allowed to capture. So blockaded, it means that there's an enemy pawn that's stopping it from moving. But if there's a chance of capturing, you can capture and then the pawn, it wouldn't be blocked. So when can a pawn go 2 steps?
If it's on the rank, the starting square.
What is the starting square for white?
2,
2.
And what is it for black?
7.
7.
How does a pawn move? A pawn goes forward 1 step. So, but if it's on the starting square, it can go 2 steps. If it's not on the starting square, it goes forward 1 step. So how a pawn moves, it goes forward 1 step, but if it's on the starting square, it can go 2 steps. How does a pawn move?
Goes
1 step.
forward.
How does a pawn capture?
Diagonal.
And what does it mean if a pawn is blocked?
It can't move. Means it can't move anymore.
Yeah. But if there's a chance of capturing something, then the pawn on e4 would be free because now it can move away. But if they didn't play their pawn to f5, we can't capture because there's no pawn that's there. If there's a pawn there, then we can capture. Now we can try questions about the pawn. How can the pawn on e2 attack both of the black pieces?
It can go forward and then capture diagonally.
Should it go 1 step or 2?
2.
Because it's on the starting square. Which white pawn is blocked and is not able to move?
The one on
D4. D4.
Which pawn can move?
One on H5.
H5.
Which white pawn can reach the 8th rank in 2 moves?
The one on
A6.
Because the other one on g3 is too far away. It's because a pawn can only go forward 1 step. It's not able to reach the 8th rank in 2 moves, but this one can. What can the pawn capture?
you can capture the rook.
Yeah. Which black piece can capture something?
The black piece can capture the rook.
Can capture the rook.
But if the rook was here, could the pawn capture?
No.
It always has to be 1 step diagonal. And the pawn on a7, it's too far away. It's not able to capture. And we did this one that it can go 2 steps and attack both of the rooks. Do you understand the pawn? Now we can learn another chess piece, and this one is called the rook. I think when we did this question, you saw the rook. The rook looks like this. It's bigger than the pawn, and the rook is more powerful than the pawn because a rook, it doesn't just have to go forward one step. It can go any number of steps. So that's what's special about the rook. The rook is easier than the pawn because the pawn, it had lots of rules like the starting square, being blocked, and how it captures. But I think the rook is easier than the pawn because a rook, it moves like a plus sign. It looks like a plus sign if of all the squares. So a rook, it can go forward, back, left, and right. But what's different about the rook and the pawn is the rook, it doesn't just have to go one step. It can go any number of steps as long as it's going forward, back, left, or right. So the rook, it has to move in the way that it does. And it's not able to change. It can't go diagonal. It always moves forward, back, left, and right. And that's the same way that a rook captures. So if the rook on d4 moves to g4, what could the black rook do?
It can go 2 steps.
Yeah, and then it can capture the white rook. So the black rook will land into the white rook, and then black can win the rook. So rook moves forward, backward, left, and right. Can the rook move to d8?
Yes.
Can it go to c5?
No,
Why can't it go there?
because it's diagonal.
Can the rook go to f3?
No.
No.
So a rook, it's not that hard. It goes forward, backward, left, and right. If you don't have any questions, we'll do the questions about the rook. How can the white rook go to the 8th rank?
It can go to the E file, the F file, the G file, the H file, and then it can go up.
It goes forward and reaches the 8th rank. How can the rook on A8 go to the square H4 in 2 moves?
down till A4, then go across to H, then go across to H4.
Yeah. This question, what it teaches you is even though the rook, it can go so many steps, it doesn't just have to go one step. Even though there's so many steps, sometimes you have to choose how many steps you want to take. Because if you go all the way, you won't be able to go to H4 in 2 moves. So you have to choose how many squares you want to go, because now you can get to H4 on the next move. What can the white rook do? Can it capture something?
Yeah,
What can it capture?
the black rook.
Yeah. Here it's a little bit harder because there's 2 rooks that the rook on D3 could capture 2 things, the rook on A3 or the rook on D8. You have to choose which one is better, the rook on D3 or the rook on D8.
The rook on D8.
Because if you did A3, in chess, what you're going to learn when we do more lessons is we try to think, what can our opponent do? Our opponent is the black pieces. So we have to think, what are the plans for the black side? And can they capture any of my pieces? So if you did the rook on A3, what would the black rook do?
It could go to A8 and then it could go to A3.
Yeah.
Or it could go to D, or it could go to D3 and then go to A3.
And the black rook could capture the white rook on D1. So that's what it could do. If you did the rook on A3, the black rook would capture the rook on D1. So it wouldn't be good. But if you did this one, you have 2 rooks. White has 2 rooks and black only has 1. But if you did this, the black rook would capture the white rook. So white would have 1 rook and black would have 1. But the better thing is to have more rooks than your opponent. What is the best move for white?
You take the rook on D4 and put it up till D8.
If the black rook captures, what would you do?
Then you could take the rook on D1 and put it up till D8, and now your rook wins.
Yeah. What it said here, it's like 2 against 1. They're saying that we have 2 rooks on the same file that are working together, which means if the rook on D1 on D4 captures and the black rook captures, the rook on D1 would be there for backup. So that's what they mean 2 against 1. They have the rook on D1 that will protect the rook on D4. The next piece that we can do is the bishop. And the bishop is also, it's not very hard, just like the rook. And the bishop moves. This is the bishop. It has a tiny circle at the top, and it also has a little line that it has this line here. And the bishop, it moves diagonal, and it also captures diagonal. So the bishop, it's not very hard. It just moves in a diagonal shape.
Like an X?
So yeah, it moves like an X. And there's something important about the bishop is that the bishop, if it starts on a brown square in chess is called a dark square. So if a bishop is on a dark square, it can only go on the dark squares. The reason is because the bishop only goes diagonal, it's not able to switch to the other color. So a dark square bishop, it only travels in the dark squares. And a light square bishop only goes in the light squares. And how a bishop captures is the same way. If the black bishop is on b6, can white capture the bishop?
Yes.
Yes.
White can capture because the enemy bishop is on the same color. But if the bishop is not on the same color, can white capture?
No.
So the bishops, they have to be on the same color if they want to capture. And the bishop, it can capture, it doesn't just capture bishops, it can capture, just like any piece, it can capture all of the pieces. It doesn't just capture bishops. So the same thing, if the enemy piece is not on the same color as the bishop won't be able to capture. So that happens with any other piece. It's not just with the bishops. Did you understand?
Yeah.
What? So here, the bishop on e4, is this bishop a light square bishop or a dark square bishop?
A light square bishop.
And a light square bishop, it's on the white squares. A dark square bishop is on the brown squares. Do you think white should capture the bishop or the rook?
The rook.
The rook.
Because I said before how we should think about what the enemy side could do. If you captured the bishop, what could the rook do?
It could capture you.
Because a rook moves in straight lines, and the rook is on the same line as the bishop, so the rook can capture. But if you captured the rook, this is the best move because now black can't capture the bishop. If you capture the rook, you would win it for free. How can the bishop go to h8 in one move?
It can go diagonally to that square.
And just like a rook, it doesn't just have to go one step. It can choose how many steps as long as it's going in the way that it moves. So a bishop moves diagonal. So as long as it's going diagonal, it can choose how many squares. So the bishop can go from one side to the other side in one move. What can the bishop capture?
The bishop can capture the rook.
But if the rook was here on a7, could the bishop capture?
No.
So if the bishop wants to capture, the enemy piece has to be on the same color. Example is if the bishop on b8 is on b7, the white bishop could capture the black bishop. But if the bishop is on b8, the white bishop can't capture because the enemy piece, which is the bishop, is on a different color. So the thinking about color is very important with the bishops. Can the white bishop capture the rook on a7 or on h6?
The one on a7.
Why can't it capture h6? Because which piece is in the way?
And it's his own color, so he can't capture his own color.
Yeah, that was very important. In chess, we can only capture pieces that are the enemy pieces. If the bishop on d4 is not able to capture the bishop on b6 because both of these bishops are white pieces. But if it was a black bishop, white could capture. So when you capture pieces, it's very important that it's the other side. You can't capture your own things. And because you can't capture your own things, the bishop is not able to capture the rook. And the rook on g5 is blocking the bishop. It's stopping the bishop from capturing the rook on h6. Because bishops, they can't jump over pieces. If there's a clear path, the bishop could capture. But if there's a piece in the way, the bishop can't capture. Later, when we learn about the knight is the only piece that can jump over other pieces. No other piece can do that.
It looks like a horse.
Yeah, this one is the knight.
Yeah.
What can the bishop do?
It can eat the rook.
Can the white bishop capture? Can the bishop on d7 capture the rook?
Yeah.
No.
No, because the bishop doesn't go in straight lines. It moves in a diagonal. If it was black's move, what could the rook capture?
It could capture the bishop.
So if it was white's move, the bishop can capture because the rook is on the same color. It's not on a different color. So the bishop could capture. But if it was black's move, the rook could capture the bishop because it's in the same line. A rook doesn't just go forward and back. It also goes left and right. I think we did this one. So that was a lot of pieces, but what we just learned was the pawn, the bishop, and the rook. We'll just quickly review. So a pawn goes forward one step.
Or 2 steps if it's on this starting.
It goes forward one step, but if it's on the starting square, it can go 2 steps. And a pawn captures one square diagonal. It's not allowed to capture if the pawn is more than one square. It has to be one square diagonal. Then we learned about the rook. The rook, we said it moves like a plus sign. It goes forward, backward, left, and right. And how it's different than a pawn is a pawn goes one step, but a rook can go more than one step as long as it's going in the plus sign. Then we learned about the bishop. The bishop moves in the diagonals, and if it's a dark square bishop, it can only go on the dark squares. It's not allowed to change the color. And if it's a light square bishop, it means it's on the white squares. So dark square bishop on brown squares, and light square bishop on the light squares. A light square bishop goes on the white squares and is not allowed to change color. That's what we learned. Do you have any questions? Bye.
Bye.
Hope you did.
Bye.
Uh,